Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So California has taken a stride to single-payer healthcare. And in taking that stride to universal healthcare, real universal healthcare, California was hit in the knees by corporatist Democrats. At least that's the way the story is gone. Progressives, people in general, were pissed. They were pissed. They were protests. Apparently, there were death threats. You could see one progressive network screaming into the camera, one after the next. So, Dayden of the Intercept reviewed the story and gave it a little bit more context. I have to be honest, I disagree with this context, though. Yeah, I disagree with this context. The more I think about it. The first time I read the story, I thought, that's interesting. Then I read it again. And I read somebody else's response to Dayden. And I say, yes, I disagree with Dayden on this. Because if his critique is true, and it may be true, but if it's true, it doesn't really matter in the context of what's taking place right now. It just doesn't. It's like you're criticizing me for something that is irrelevant right now in this process. That's all I mean. So let's go through it. I'm going to try to make this quick. Every time I've done this, it's ran long. So I'm going to try and go through this pretty quickly. In the days since California speakers Anthony Rendon shelved for the year SB 562, which intends to establish a single-payer healthcare system, he's been subjected to mass protests, even death threats. The bill's chief backer, including the California Nurses Association and the Bernie Sanders-affiliated Our Revolution, angrily pointed at Rendon as the main roadblock to truly universal health care. They're completely wrong. What's more, they know they're wrong. They're perfectly aware that SB 562 is a shell bill that cannot become law without a ballot measure approved by voters. Rather than committing to raising the millions of dollars that would need it to overcome the special interests and pass the initiative, they would apparently rather deceive their supporters, hiding the realities of California's woeful political structure in favor of a morality play designed to advance careers and aggrandize power. That may sound harsh, but it's gentle. Amid an uncertain future for U.S. healthcare, California's overhaul attempt has galvanized the left and received national attention, but the peculiarities of state law and process remains a mystery, allowing advocates to create a serious gap between the expectations of their supporters and the very real obstacles in the way. It's because you can't do funding without the help of the voters, because California's fatal addiction to its perverse form of direct democracy. The blame, in other words, lies with ourselves. To figure this out, you need only to turn to the actual legislative analysis of the Senate bill, which passed in early June. It states very clearly what Rendon alluded to in his announcement, shelving SB 562. There are several provisions of our state constitution that would prevent the legislature from creating a single-payer system envisioned in the bill without voter approval. To cut through the clutter, let's focus on the biggest constitutional hurdle, known as Proposition 98. That passed in 1988. Proposition 98 requires that roughly 40 to 50% of all general fund revenues, money and state revenue receives in taxes, must go to K-12 education. If you include community college, it must exceed 50%. Proposition 98 was itself a reaction to notorious Proposition 13, which sharply limited state property taxes. It was intended to ensure that education received its fair share of funding, but it also created a budgetary straitjacket that affects virtually anything that costs California money. Now, understand what they're saying here. I mean, because that's a little bit of jargon, but what it boils down to is 50% of the revenue that's raised in taxes must go towards education. So if you raise more money in taxes for single-payer healthcare system, well, That's also included in the 50%, meaning you would need to increase taxes tremendously in order to get enough money for the single health payer, even though it's going to be 4 times less, meaning they're going to save a huge amount of money doing single payer and cover each and every person of that country. Of that city, of that state. You still have this quagmire, the straitjacket. This is 50% of the revenue must go towards education. Education is always going to get more and more and more when taxes are raised. So it's how are you going to get enough money for your healthcare system when education is just dominating that much of the budget? That's the point he's making. Now, that's the point he's making. He's essentially saying, look, that's a straitjacket. Whatever you do, that's a straitjacket. That's a budgetary constraint. If you need to do something about that, you're going to have to get a vote from the public. You need a proposition. You need the public itself to say this particular thing is okay. Otherwise, you're going to run into a legislative buzzsaw. Now here it is. In order to fund single payer in California, you must loosen the Proposition 98 budget straitjacket. There's no secret decoder ring or safety valve around that. The only way to truly get it done is with a ballot measure that either overhauls Proposition 98 or exempts single payer from the formula. Anybody with a day's worth of experience in California's government recognizes this. The Senate version of SB 562 stated it in black and white, but every single denunciation of Speaker Rendon's decision to delay the bill fails to mention this reality. The SB 562 cannot become law without voter approval. Now, this is an interesting part too. When asked straight up about the obstacles, CNA Director of Public Policy Michael Lightly pointed to language in SB 562 that would stall adoption of the single payer unless adequate funding was available. He called it a fail-safe mechanism. Lightly is implicitly saying that SB 562 can never create a single payer system. The fail-safes will always be triggered unless the state constitution gets changed by the ballot, because there would never be enough money under the current iteration of Proposition 98. Saying that out loud would depress enthusiasm and lessen CNA's perceived power. So they hide the ball. I have to be honest, reading that doesn't sound like that's what he said, but okay, we'll go with that. If there was real interest in getting single payer done, supporters wouldn't focus on a shell bill, but would start raising gobs of money you need to get it done for a ballot measure, which will come under massive assault from every industry attempting to shift away from for-profit healthcare. And he's essentially saying they're going to put a huge amount of money to try to kill that proposition. So, Lightly, the person that he just mentioned there, responded to this. Now, Michael Lightly is Director of Public Policy at CNA, California Nursing Association. He responds to it. If Dayden had spoken with California Nurses Association, who are the sponsors of SB 562, he would know that many of the assumptions about the California single-payer health bill are wrong. His attack on single-payer supporters in California misguided, and his one true path analysis false. His outrage is misplaced. The only one insulted here are the readers of the Intercept, who must wade through opinion masquerading as political intelligence. Yeah, I kind of agree. I do kind of agree. Because his answer here makes perfect sense. His response here makes perfect sense. First, the assumption that California's Assembly Speaker, Anthony Rendon, will engage in the substance of SB 562. Simply put, there is no good faith on Rendon's part. He knew CNA had developed amendments when he stalled the bill, and his own staff had told us to focus on policy rather than financing, which we were doing with one of the bill's co-authors. The Speaker talks of sending the bill back to the Senate, but under the rules, he knows it can only be amended in the Assembly now. We prepared to address the financing policy committee approval. We were working to address all outstanding issues through the regular legislative process. Rendon halted the process. So it's disingenuous to claim the bill is incomplete. The process to complete it was stopped. The accusation that SB 562 is a shell bill reveals ignorance of the bill's policies, status, and legislative process. Like other significant legislation, including SB 32's Cap and Trade Program, which was a 12-page bill, it's appropriate to delegate some significant decisions to the governing board. For example, Dayden's questions SB 562's not going into that. That's the weeds. Moreover, Dayden insists, but we know this, if you double the state general fund by putting a single payer system on the budget, at least 45% of those new revenues have to go towards education. No, we don't know that. We can address those constitutional issues in the bill, and its cost estimate is exaggerated. A reading of the study from this University of Massachusetts Amherst on SB 562 would have corrected this mistake. But if saving for the individuals and businesses achieved by eliminating the insurance company premiums, deductibles, copays, and because of slashed expenses in the system as a whole by ending the waste, profit, and inefficiencies of the current healthcare industry, the cost is $37 billion less per year than what we spend now, while covering everybody with more comprehensive benefits. Now, in a cruel twist of words, Dayden wrote, lightly as implicitly saying that SB 562 can never create a single-payer system, when the reality is the reverse. Californians must receive federal monies for health care, which they are eligible, and utilizing the existing waiver authority, as well as raising the necessary funds, financing options for which are contained in the University of Massachusetts study SB 562, among others. Single-payer can be implemented in California. And there's one last part. Dayden mentioned that Jerry Brown would not sign the bill. He responds to this also. Despite Dayden's certainty, Governor Jerry Brown has not taken a position on the bill. The only Democrats Rendon is protecting are those funded by the health insurance companies. To be honest, I agree with Lightly on this. My thing is, you put up a bill. The Senate passes a version of the bill itself. Now, the bill goes into the General Assembly. They're debating on the bill. They want to add amendments to that particular bill. As they're going through the legislative process, Rendon stopped the process. Now, yes, they were going to run into things like Proposition 98. And yes, there were going to be other considerations they probably would have had to consider. But that's with any process. Of course, you're going to run into things that you need to find a way around. I don't know what that has to do with him stopping the bill. I also don't understand why you're pretending that this guy is an honest actor in the process. Why do you think Rendon is an honest actor? Now, I say that because saying that the people who are in our revolution, the California Nurses Association, that these guys are out here grandstanding. They're not grandstanding. They're trying to get their legislation through Congress, through the political apparatus. Now, if your complaint is, well, yeah, but they're not telling the people that they need to go through the public. What's wrong with them exhausting their legislative potential? What's wrong with them exhausting their legislative potential? Meaning, it's one thing if Rendon hadn't put the kibosh on it and they just let it go. It's possible that they came to a point where they needed the public for a referendum. Fair enough. But that's not where they were. And they were killed in the process to which they were pursuing. Why on earth are you dinging them for this? And I wanted to review this because it didn't. Initially, when I first read it, I thought, okay, this is adding a little bit more context to the situation. But I gotta be honest, not that much more context. You've told me that they need to go through for a public referendum. Okay. So what? So what? And how do you know that they must do it that way? That just seems to be massive conjecture to me. How do you know that these guys can't come up with some legislative means to get through this thicket to which you speak of? And I still say, letting the process go, letting them work through those issues, letting them figure that stuff out. If at some point they run into a buzzsaw where it's like, okay, we need a public referendum for this, then you have it. Then you have it. Then you deal with that issue. Then you get your public ready for something like that. But all of this is massive conjecture. And you're making massive assumptions in regards to what these guys will be capable of doing through legislature. So I'll leave it at that. I mean, if you're going to be paying that much less for healthcare, are you telling me you can't find a way around? Yeah, I just disagree with him. I think Dayden is off on this. I think he's massively off on this. I've seen other people freaking out and pissed off over this particular issue. I gotta be honest, they should be. They should be. California was finally trying to take this step into, yes, we're the largest state, and yes, we can do this. We can pull this off. We can give each and every citizen in our particular state, or each and every person in our particular state, healthcare. I don't see the problem with letting the process pursue its way. Let it pursue its way. You may be right, but right now we don't know that you're right. And you're literally dinging these guys and saying these guys are grandstanding. For what end? I don't know what end. I don't know what you want to approve on this or what you're trying to accomplish. Yeah, I don't know what you're trying to accomplish. I understand you wanted to add context. I don't know if you added that much context. You have told me that they may need a referendum. So good. But you also told me in a way that completely attacks the characters of multiple people who are part of a process of literally trying to get people healthcare. Good job with that. Good job. I'll leave it at that. If you enjoy the content, feel free to share, rate, subscribe. You can always support the work through Patreon. Thank you.